Hello, my fellow extraordinary Americans. My name is Cosmos Dar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America? Well, you see, America has always been about freedom, opportunity, and the pursuit of happiness. However, most Americans are not free when it comes to the financial front. Most Americans are suffering from financial slavery due to loss of jobs, stagnant wages, inflation, and debt. Wealth and income inequality is the norm now, and the middle class has all but disappeared. So Extraordinary America is about the abolition of financial slavery. It is about the financial freedom of the 99%. It is about the nation of immigrants and the descendant of immigrants restoring the extraordinary within themselves and setting themselves free. The path to financial freedom is through financial education. It is through becoming entrepreneurs and investors on the light side. In this podcast, I interview fellow Americans who fought against the odds. Many of them came from humble beginnings to see how they did it. It is my hope through these interviews that the extraordinary within you shall awaken and that you will abolish financial slavery from your life and realize the American dream. Once again, welcome to Extraordinary America. Welcome back to the show, my fellow extraordinary Americans. For today's guest, we have John Jervert. John is a visionary leader and founder of Black Point Standard Consulting Group, a strategic advisory firm that specializes in developing high performance teams for CEOs, venture capital, and private equity firms. With over 10 years of experience in human performance improvement coaching and consulting, John has a proven track record of success working with a diverse range of clients, including CEOs, executives, icons, influential leaders, professional athletes, and Navy SEALs. Through his work with Black Point Standard, John has helped clients access the most elite talent and high-level networks on the planet in order for them to create global impact and a thriving society. He's also the leader of the firm's Zerkers division, where he designs and facilitates adventure-based retreats that help individuals and teams build trust, communication, and problem-solving skills. He is known for his ability to inspire and motivate people to push beyond their comfort zones to reach their goals, and his extensive experience, knowledge, and passion for adventure and human performance make him one of the top human performance retreat facilitators in the world. In addition to his professional pursuits, John is an avid surfer, extreme sports enthusiast, and outdoor enthusiast who thrives in challenging environments and leverages his passion for adventure to enhance human performance. His unique approach combines the best of adventure and human performance to deliver results that are nothing short of extraordinary. So I'm really honored to have him on the show. John, are you there?
I am here. How you doing, Cosmos?
I'm doing good, John. It's an honor to have you on the show. I know that you're a performance. You're in the performance coaching business, and you're the founder and CEO. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background and how you got started?
Yeah, actually, I got started a few years ago, and it was a moment in time. I had spent nearly a decade in the banking industry. I got married pretty young when I was 23, and I had a baby, and I kind of got into a job that was paying the bills and was fulfilling to a certain extent. But after about a decade there, I realized I was in the wrong spot and not aligned. And one day my daughter came to me and she said, "Dad, do you love what you do?" And I couldn't honestly look her in the eyes and tell her I did. So that was a moment that I realized I needed to start leading by example. So I left the banking industry, and it was one of those moments in time where there's like a little bit of fear, because you had a family to support, but I had this dream inside of me that I knew I had to pursue. And so I started doing things. I left the banking industry. I started doing things like skydiving and bungee jumping and endurance races and backpacking 3/4 of the coast to Costa Rica and surfing with crocodiles. And I realized that
Wait. Surfing with crocodiles? John, that is crazy. Oh my God.
yeah. I mean, we were out there surfing, and in the US, like the lifeguards blow the whistle, and it's like they're just maybe telling somebody that they're in the wrong spot. But I was out there, and the guy was blowing the whistle, and I didn't take much mind to it. And then I came in, and they're like, there was a crocodile tied to the tree, and they're like, "Oh, this was actually out there surfing with you." I'm like, Well, that would have been information to have a little bit sooner. So apparently when you're in Costa Rica, if somebody blows a whistle when you're out there surfing, you might want to come in.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was interesting. But apparently it happens quite often in Costa Rica. So I guess it's just something to get used to. But so I went to and I backpacked to Pavones, which is one of the longest left-hand breaks in the world. And I've been backpacking with like 30 pounds of weight or 50 pounds of weight on my back, my surfboard. And, it was about a 3 hour hike there because we missed the actual bus to the actual point. And, I was exhausted and the sun was setting and like the water was breaking over my feet. And I heard this voice within and without. It was like this vibration. Um, and it said, well done, now go tell the world. And I realized at that point that, that I was meant to pursue this mission of helping people transform their lives and help them overcome fear and gain the confidence and commitment to relentlessly pursue their dreams. So I came back to the state and I started facilitating adventure challenge experiences, and actually did things like have people write their own obituary before they jumped out of an airplane, to illustrate how finite life really is and how important it is to pursue your dreams, because we don't know how much time we have left on this planet. And that did things like whitewater rafting and having people learn about flow state. So the rocks representing the obstacles in life and the river representing flow. So I started connecting these like physical experiences with the mental shifts and transitions in order to optimize one's performance. So I came back to the States and I was like, all the things that had that maybe I had a little fear around or anxiety or little low self-confidence, things like that started to shift. I'm like, I think I might be onto something here. So I officially got certified as a professional coach and started coaching individuals. And so I combined coaching and consulting, and eventually, got into forming Black Point Standard, which became the human performance company. And I've learned from some of the top people in the world and developed relationships with some absolutely tremendous individuals. Some of which have scaled multiple companies to billions of dollars. So now I can bring all those resources, in addition to the methodology I developed, to individuals to help them accelerate their performance and optimize their life.
Wow, John, this is amazing because what you just described to me and the audience is basically kind of like you were in the banking industry, which is pretty much like all about money and numbers and all that stuff. You went on a journey, some would call it like an adventurous spiritual journey. Like half the people in this world like would want to have like a spiritual journey like that, and then basically you came back with the knowledge. This is almost like kind of like a movie in a certain respect, like you go over there and then you say that you had an inner voice tell you that this is your dream, like this is what you have to do. You know how many people like would wish that they had something telling them what their path and purpose is. Like a lot of the times it could be underestimated, but like a lot of people don't know what their path and purpose is in this world. So, from your perspective, how would somebody go about finding their path and purpose?
I think it's really everybody has it inside of them. So the first thing that I tell people to do is to figure out what emotions that you want to create in others. So for me, it's about helping people feel alive and awakened inside. So if you can figure out what that thing is that you desire to create in this world, starting with the feelings, that's a clue as to a potential way to go. The second thing is, I always recommend people writing their own obituary. I wrote it when I first started in the financial industry as an exercise, and it's set in a box somewhere, for about 10 years. And I picked it up later on, and I realized that my life was passing me by, and that all those things that I had, all those dreams, were just like slipping away. So that is a document that you can keep and frame up, right next to your bed or wherever you want to keep it, close to mind, because over the years I've seen those things come true. Like, so it's pretty intense seeing those things to come true. And then the third thing is to think about what pisses you off. So what is in your heart that you feel is absurd that you want to change in 10 years? And chances are, because it's in your heart, you were potentially meant to do something about it. So when you can connect some of these things, and there's a whole process called the Who Am I exercise that I work people through that helps them identify truly who they are, underlying everything, and help them move towards that thing, instead of being in maybe a career that they're unfulfilled with, or a relationship, or a situation in their life. Because sometimes you feel alone, right, in that process, because society in general is saying, hey, do this, do this, do that. And eventually you succumb to it. And there's a tremendous amount of energy that you need to get connected with in order to break free from that mindset. And, that's what I'm here to tell people do.
So John, it's a very interesting point that you bring up because like a lot of people they feel stuck in their jobs, but they don't have the courage to go leave their job and like take the risk that you took, which is by the way a huge risk you took. You had a family and then you decided to like leave like your thing and like to pursue your passion. It's really difficult for most people to do that. So my question to you would be, how would how would you advise somebody that is stuck in a career job and they want to go do something that is something that they're passionate about, but they're too afraid to like try something new because they're like in the comfort zone or because it's too risky financially.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd actually advise them to do exactly what I did, because I was at a point where I just needed to get out, and I probably would have had a little bit of a transitionary period. Um, so I took the leap of faith, and I had no idea what was going to happen on the way down, and I didn't care because I just was ready to go. That caused a lot of, hardship for my family, actually. So I said to myself, I'm going to live life to the fullest or die trying. And that meant I would do it whether I succeeded or not. And I ended up having to claim bankruptcy at certain points, sell my house, eventually move back in with family. I had to trade in my dream car at certain points. So like there's been ups and downs, and coming from being a banker, right, and working and making a pretty good living, to having to go back with family and kind of go through these challenging situations, and at points not having food on the table for my family. There was times that I could have given up. And I think that if you can persevere and move through that and know that everything will be okay, and have a supportive family, those are the things that are super important when you're making that transition. So number one is having the support of your family, getting them all on the same page, and being willing to sacrifice whatever. It's like, be willing to lose everything in order to gain everything. But, if that's not an option, which, in hindsight, like I said, I would have been a little bit more compassionate towards my family's experience through the process, is to, maybe work on something part-time, after hours, something that you're super passionate about, something on the weekends, capture back like 15 minutes in your day to work on something that you're passionate about, and then see where that goes. And then eventually, work down to see if you can go part-time, right? 20 hours a week, and do something to cover what your basis is, and then continue to grow and grow and grow. And, the idea of having 5 iterations of, a business or a different career, that really holds true. And some people don't go through that. So be willing to fail, but never give up.
So John, it's an interesting thing that you say this because when you did your transition, you basically skydived. Like the experience you went through was like somebody, because I know I've skydived twice, and it's
Mhm.
basically what you described to me, like from going to banker to like what you did was like a skydiving experience. But what you're advising people to do is to transition on an incremental level. Like first start out as a hobby, and then go into it part time, and then slowly get to a level where like the dimes are covered, and then you're going for the dollars with regards to what you're passionate about. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on your situation. Like, if you could just go for it, go for it. Like, it's going to accelerate the process, but just be prepared for what's to come, and move through it. But if you want to be a little bit more responsible, sort of, and you have a family, things like that, there is like a few different stages to it, I would say, for sure. And what's interesting about skydiving too is that the first time I did it, it was like I was freaked out and like nervous and tense, and it's the same thing with making a transition or changing directions. Like, first time you do it, it's like you're super tense and you're nervous, and the second time the guy's like, you're like one of the most relaxed people I've ever jumped with. So once you do those things, they start to become second nature and you can relax into it and then become more aware and see more of what is around you. So I was able to look out and see the ocean and other things as opposed to just holding on for dear life.
So John, you talk about like in your performance thing, like you're pretty much like really good at getting out of your comfort zone, right? Like, but most people find that really hard to do. Like, it's one of the hardest things for them to do. It's kind of like, you're in a warm shower and you're just super comfortable, but you don't want to go out into the cold and then do the things necessary to get to that better state of life. Like, how do you advise people to get out of their comfort zone in a way that's like practical?
Well, to get outside your comfort zone, you don't need to go more than like 4 or 5% outside of your comfort zone in order to gain um, an advantage in where you're going. So it doesn't have to be huge. Sometimes people going up to talking with somebody at a bar is outside their comfort zone. Sometimes it's jumping out of planes. Sometimes it's, so everybody has a different threshold. So I'd say find your threshold and do something enough that it scares you, but doesn't scare you to the point where you're not going to continue. Like when I got mentored by Brad Gerlach, who was one of the top surfers in the world at one point in the career, he was number one in the world, and he surfed 60-foot waves. And I got some time to mentor with him. And he said, you just don't go out in 60-foot waves and, take somebody new out in 60-foot waves. You go out to the shoulder and have them watch it for a little bit. And then they move in a little bit, move in a little bit, move in a little bit. So I think it's a very personal experience as to how far you want to push yourself outside your comfort zone. So I like to think about it like this, is that, when you go outside our comfort zone, it's fear, like we feel fear, but fear is actually excitement is fear's cousin. So when I feel fear, I actually lean into it and know that I'm moving in the right direction. And we're actually hardwired to avoid, getting killed or danger or fear. So you're actually going against your instinctual intuition. So it's switching, bypassing all those thousands of years of evolution and knowing that we're not trying to be safe from predators, saber-toothed tigers and things like that. So knowing that we're operating from a mind that has not evolved to where we're at right now, we now say, okay, so I feel this fear. Intuitively, it feels like I shouldn't be doing this, but I know that if I step outside my comfort zone, that I'm going to get to where I want to go. Let me lean into this. Let me embrace this fear and turn it into excitement.
Wow, John, you bring up a really good point because I studied this concept of fight and flight response. And like basically, when you're in a really dangerous situation or when you're doing something that you're not used to, you get this really strange sensation where you can either, and the way people respond is either in the fight mode or the flight mode. And if you can convert the flight mode into fight mode, then it creates a lot of excitement and an adrenaline rush, at least for a lot of people. So I don't know if that's like similar to what you're talking about, but like you were mentioning about turning fear into something that's how do you like from your perspective, how are you going to turn that fear into excitement or something that's a positive emotion?
Yeah, it's really awareness, and you're right on with the fight or flight. And it's either conscious based thinking or fear based thinking. So we can be reactive to a situation. And this goes into like different levels of consciousness and the conscious human performance conversation, where, in essence, there's like 7 different levels of consciousness that people can operate in. So if you're like, say, level 1 is fear, lethargy. Level 2 is anger, frustration, rage. Level 3 is maybe rationalization, blaming others. Level 4 is maybe somebody that reacts in helping others, but is not helping themselves as much. Level 5 is maybe a lot of energy, a lot of ideas, a lot of scattered attention, very entrepreneurial. Level 6 is maybe somebody that operates in spiritual realm. And then level 7 is pure passion and logic and passion combined. Um, so it's being aware and being able to step outside of the situation and choose, am I going to show up in a fear-based mindset and decision, or am I going to look at it consciously? How can I create or perceive this situation in a positive, and I'm not saying positive or negative, but in a way that's going to serve my path and my mission.
That's really interesting. So, John, with regards to this fear and like you transforming it, what was like the biggest lesson you or lesson you learned over your transition period from the banking industry to where you're at now? Like during this entire journey, what would be like a significant lesson like you learned over the process?
The biggest lesson is that when we focus on what we don't want, we focus on our fears. That's exactly what we get. So one of the biggest fears I had in pursuing this path was, not being able to support my family financially through the process. And that eventually led to us claiming bankruptcy, because I think at that time early on, I was, focused on that a little bit too much, and not focused on like you're trying to prevent something from happening as opposed to creating the future that I desire, and then having the mindset of like certainty of what's going to happen. So, I grew up in a household that there was scarcity around money, and not the best environment, not saying it was the worst, but so there was a lot of that to overcome. So if I were to choose one thing, it would be the awareness in that transition, and knowing and stepping into the things that I desired, as opposed to there was a desire, but there was also a little bit of residual in the things that I was afraid to happen, and as soon as those things happened, as soon as I claimed bankruptcy, that the next day I was like, the sun just came up. Like life continues and goes on, right? So it's like sometimes you allow those things to happen and then you free yourself from them.
Wow, John, like a lot of times, like a lot of people, if they went through your situation, they would not be able to get out of it. But you had a different mindset. Like during your entire process where you had bankruptcy and like you had to think about finances, what was the evolution of your thought process and the actions, and what would you advise somebody who would be in a similar position of how to go through something like that?
Well, I think a lot of times society, we place a lot of value on um, what we're doing, our results. Like for instance, like in sales, right? A lot of times, if you're in sales and you have a bad month, like you don't only have a bad sales month, but you also have a bad mental month. It's like you get down on yourself, maybe your relationships deteriorate and things like that. So the biggest lesson I learned in that is that I'm not where I'm at a lot of times. Like, like regardless of how down and out I've been over the years, that's not me. It's how I'm showing up, who is me. So if I'm showing up with resilience, with determination, with passion, regardless of the situation, if I'm doing great or if I'm struggling, because there's nothing that is set, everything changes. We went through COVID, right? And a lot of people's worlds got turned upside down. And those that place their value on things in this world, they struggle in those times. But what if, regardless of the situation, you could have the mental fortitude to continue on and have that stuff almost not affect you, you know, and actually become a gift and a blessing to make you stronger.
Wow, John. No, I'm actually I'm kind of like impressed like how the evolution of like how you went through that and then you ended up going to the other side. And on a different note, I wanted to ask you, John, about so American identity, right, is about one of the core American identities is about the pursuit of happiness, right? And you are focused on helping people attain their dreams and attain that level of happiness. So, what do you think is stopping most people today, from attaining the like the state of happiness, and how do you think they should go about it?
I think true happiness is just a perspective. So I think it's just a simple shift of a mindset. And so a lot of people will say, like, I'll be happy when I get this car, I'll be happy when I get this house, or when I get this job, or when I have this much money. So
Results oriented, yeah.
exactly. So we can choose happiness in every single moment. And actually, I went through some special forces military events, training and things like that. And one of the things they said is embrace the suck. So if you can embrace the suck and actually have it.
I've never heard of that. You'll have to explain to me and the audience what that means exactly.
Yeah, so basically embracing the suck means that instead of showing up in a challenging situation and getting frustrated and angry and maybe avoiding the thing, you lean into it. You embrace the things that suck, and they actually start to bring you joy. And that's one of the reasons why I love using challenges as as a method to move people into a new mindset, is because when you're put under stress, you can truly see how that person's operating in the world. So, like, if they're under stress, do they kind of withdraw and avoid, or do you see frustration and rage and all this other stuff? So, the whole point of us pursuing our passion, a lot of times, if we're in an unfulfilling career, is that we want to experience something different. But then people get into their businesses or their new jobs, and they're like, this is frustrating. I feel the same as I did when I was in my job. So subconsciously they self-sabotage themselves because they're like, man, this is the same feeling. But if you can embrace the things that are challenging and hard and not necessarily fun at the time, the true success in life is having a good time in any situation, you know, and that leads to the ultimate positive outcome. So not getting focused so much on the outcomes and results are important, but if you can feel good in the pursuit of that, that's true happiness.
I see. I mean, it's kind of like what you're saying does make sense, but a lot of people tend to be results oriented and they try to look at the outcomes instead of just being in the moment. Like, I think there's like a kind of like a Zen Buddhist perspective to what you're saying, but I don't know, like that's basically what I'm getting at it. So, did you like where did you get this understanding from? Was it through your experiences or was it through spirituality in general?
Um, it was a combination of both. It was I've always had this connection, I feel, to like the spiritual piece of life, divine love and connection and compassion, from a young age. That's kind of intuitive to me. And taking that into a very highly competitive sales industry, like the banking industry or finance industry, and then seeing the opposite side of that, where I'm sitting in a training room and somebody in front of 125 people starts the meeting off with greed is good, and I'm like, this is the opposite of what I believe. So maybe I'm done with this, this culture. So yeah, I really do believe that, getting connected to, like, being okay with pursuing results, because that gives us kind of like a barometer of what's working, what's not working. So when I say level 7, I mean, we're not ignoring the practical application and the logical approach to success, because there's value in that, but also merging the spiritual into that. So when you can do both, then you have an advantage in life in order to make progress quicker than most, where some people are stuck in the practical, some people are stuck in the spiritual, but combining those two is super powerful.
So, John, this is really interesting when you mention greed is good, right? Because that was basically 1980s America in a nutshell. If you went to Manhattan or New York in the 1980s and you had Gordon Gekko and then you had like all these major billionaires and like Wall Street and all of that, like they're basically talking about like that was like essentially the mentality, like that was the era. But then now we're noticing in the 2020s, there's like a different mindset with the younger generation which are who are more leaning on a spiritual basis. And I feel like on a national level, there's kind of like a battle between the egotistical greed is good, like get as much as you can, versus a more spiritual understanding that you're mentioning. Like, what is your perspective on how America has evolved, like from that greed is good to like a more younger generation that believes in like the same concepts that you're thinking of?
Well, I think the real big distinction there is that wealth has become a spiritual pursuit. And if energy is money, and we're exchanging energy, it's actually looking at the pursuit of wealth, of creating more positive impact in more people's lives. So it's not necessarily a win-lose situation, in the pursuit, whereas that might have been previous. Now it's a win-win scenario. Like, how can we create a positive impact in everybody's lives that are involved? And then also look at it from creating a global positive impact that isn't at the cost of, employees or people that are involved in the system, is where I see things going personally. Is like, I don't think we can sustain if people's souls are not being served in the organizations that they're a part of, and people are waking up to that, especially going through the pandemic. And so there's a lot of people out there that are asking themselves, after spending decades or years in a job, like, is this really how I want to spend my life for the rest of my life, or is there something different? They're like, well, where do I go? Where do I turn? Like, who's out there? How can I learn? And so I believe that the education system needs to go through a revolution, so that, like, individuals, students can go through and learn some of the things that I've learned over the last 40 years, through experiences, through, a decade of challenges and hardship. So school systems and corporations, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to create new ways of learning. And that's one of the things that I'm doing with the retreats and the work that I do in the world.
No, like I respect what you're doing, because at the end of the day, a lot of people slave away at the corporate culture, at the corporate America, and then they give their entire life to that without living for themselves. Like actually being passionate, like doing what makes them happy. And they work to make other people's dreams come true, but they never really focus on what is important to them, what makes them truly happy. And then the process that you're talking about, the experiences that you're talking about, what you went through, is basically essentially symbolizing that. You're working in the banking industry, and then all of a sudden you had this transition process, which I wanted to ask you, like, what was that moment in you that made you decide, I can't do this anymore?
The moment I realized that my decisions and my fear was affecting my kid's life, my daughter's life. Like, they're watching, anybody that has kids, they're watching your decisions and how you show up. And I didn't want to do that. I had a father that sacrificed much of his life, and, wasn't around, and worked in New York. And, the impact that had on me was profound. So I didn't want my daughter to take on that mindset or that fear, or carry that forward into future generations. So that was my motivation, to lead her by example and my son by example, and show them truly anything's possible. Because I mean, if we don't do that in our lifetimes, then future generations suffer. So I feel it's a more obligation as leaders of our families and leaders of ourselves, to step into that and to get beyond that fear, for the future.
John, I would recommend everybody, all the extraordinary Americans that are watching this right now, to basically take a look at their lives and like be like, you know what, I have to do that which makes me happy. And like they need to have a sense of self-reflection, because like working for somebody else's dreams at this point is not going to serve, like it's not going to lead us to the next level. But I'm really glad that you shared your motivation with us, because it's really important for us to know these things.
Absolutely. And that's not to say, like, there aren't organizations and companies out there that people absolutely love to work for. Some people do want to just contribute, as an employee, but I think if you have something inside of you that is not being fulfilled in that pursuit, then don't be afraid to take a leap of faith, and go for it.
So, John, from your perspective, what is the greatest challenge that Americans face when it comes to realizing the American dream, and how do you think they can overcome it?
I think the biggest challenge is the gap. There's a lot of inflation. There's a lot of, like, the money is not necessarily going as far as it used to. And a lot of times there has to be two family members working, you know, And that leaves very little room. So, um, having the opportunity to maybe downscale some of living expenses and things like that. So I think the biggest challenge would be in order to sustain yourself while you're making these transitions, because as you're starting to gain skills and knowledge and wisdom, that takes time, and I think that's the biggest challenge is, being able to sustain yourself or make that transition, especially if you're making, 150, $250,000 a year, and you're making good money, but you're not necessarily fulfilled. There's a little bit of a curve, right? And when you're starting a business or, pursuing something different. So I think that's the biggest challenge. And then the second one is the knowledge, getting access to the right knowledge. And, there's a lot of great information out there, but information doesn't always equal wisdom. So I think, getting wisdom from mentors and organizations that have the correct path to accelerate your process is also hard to find sometimes, because we're constantly being marketed to, and there's lots of messages and scattered attention. So those are two pitfalls I see that could be worked on for sure as a society.
I think like right now there's like a lot of information, as you're saying, like a lot of fake information, and like a lot of people are trying to figure out what is real and what is not real. And a lot of times like they will gravitate towards things that they already have an opinion about. But I think like in order to get to the next level, we have to see all the sides and just try and then focus on the self-improvement part, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, finding somebody that's been where you want to go um, is so important. Finding that right person or a group that can help come alongside. And I think one of the other pitfalls is feeling isolated. So when you go out and you start pursuing things, and people are like, "Are you insane? Like, what are you doing? Like, just go back to your job and be like everybody else." There's a huge pull in that, and that can be very isolating, especially as you're shifting your mindset. And the majority of the population might not be there yet. So I think having a community of people or a group or organization of my like mindset can accelerate that process and make it a little bit easier as well.
You're so right about that, John, because in your entrepreneurial journey, or at least in like mine and like a bunch of other people, like a lot of times we feel a sense of isolation because it's not easy to shift. Like you've been living this certain life like for all this time, and you have these friends who are on a certain wavelength, but then now you make this transition and they want to like they have the crab bucket mentality, they want to pull you back, but you have to get to this next level. And so the way you do it is by meeting these new people that are on this wavelength that you want to be. But it's easier said than done, like the process is it's a pretty strained process at the very least for like a lot of people. I don't know, like what would be your perspective of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that need to happen in order for you to be you, like, because there's so many different layers that are kind of unaware that we're putting on ourselves over the years that we might be unaware of. So part of that, I believe, is finding out truly who you are and becoming that person, being that person. And then I believe that those resources and individuals will come into your life, so focusing on being the best version of yourself and releasing yourself from negative patterns and thought processes and things like that. I think is huge in finding those people and resonating, energetically, um, differently over the years. And I think that's a huge thing that isn't necessarily taught. Like they don't teach you how to be in school, you know?
John, I personally believe we have to be the best authentic version of ourselves, but a lot of times most people are basically too busy thinking about what other people would think of them. They're too busy on like giving this image, but they're living this fake life. And what you and I are talking about is we cannot do that. Like it's far more happier. You'll be far more happier in the long term being authentic with yourself, knowing who you are, and then basically living the life that you want to live. But yeah, I would want my audience to know that because there might be members in this audience that are basically living a life that others want them to live, but they're not living for themselves in that regard.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that you brought this point up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was even like as I was going through my professional career, my legal name is John Christian Jervert. My nickname is Kit. But I would separate those two individuals, like the professional me and the me that likes to surf and travel and do all this other stuff. So the minute that I combined both those and gave myself permission to be who I am, regardless of what the situation is, that's when things started to really get interesting and start to accelerate, because it's like we push some of our parts of ourselves away, thinking that, we're going to get judged or it's not how we should be showing up. But every amazing relationship that I have, there isn't any of that. It's like we show up as who we are, where we're at, and move on from there.
John, you have no idea how motivational and inspirational you are. With what you're saying makes it completely resonates with me, you know? And so, yeah. So, John, I wanted to ask you about your company, Black Point Standard, the consulting group. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about that and what it does?
Yeah, so basically, I look for impact-driven, visionary leaders who are building businesses that are impacting the planet in positive ways. And, I basically bring in resources, whether that's external teams to help support them, or whether it's me coming in and doing conscious human performance work with the leadership, um, and really surround an organization with the resources and network that they need in order to accelerate their growth and accelerate their impact in the world. So that would be the first part of Black Point Standard. And then the second piece of it, which is the Zerkers division, and that's putting people, whether it's through teams, individuals, through these experiences, to help them. Like when I went down to Costa Rica the first time, came back, my family said I was a completely different person. So basically taking people through the experiences that I went through, which are like skydiving and zip lining and surfing and all these different things, connecting the metaphysical and physical experiences, and then allowing them to come back and perform at their optimal levels, is the other component of it.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I love skydiving. It's a lot of fun, and I would recommend my audience to definitely take a look into like what you do. And so, the other question I had was, are there any projects that you're working on right now that you want the audience to get a glimpse into?
Yeah, we're actually coming together a group to look at resort properties in Colorado and Costa Rica, and building out properties to run retreats to. So my vision, long-term vision, is to have many, many coaches and facilitators under Zerkers and running adventure challenge retreats around the world. So that's what we're in the process of doing, is actually raising funds to purchase resorts and build out retreat centers to bring people to have transformational experiences and create that evolved education, the evolved education institutions that I think we really need, because it's going to take a while for standard education systems to incorporate some of these things into the curriculum for whatever reason. So we're gonna be building out those facilities and locations for people to come and truly transform their lives and their mindsets.
John, that is awesome. I really love what you're doing. And so I wanted to ask, how can the audience connect with you and get to know a little bit more about yourself and what you're doing and your work?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, if there's anybody out there that's a visionary leader, creating impact-driven business, and wants to scale, then you'd want to go to blackpointstandard.com, be it Black Point Standard, all one word, .com. And, if you're somebody that is, in transition or wanting to step into becoming a better leader or optimizing your mental and physical performance and love adventure, then I'd recommend going to zerkers.com, which is zerkers.com, and connecting with me there.
John, thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm really glad that you came on the show and shared your insights. It's amazing. And I have like a deep respect for the way you think. And I would love for you to come back on the show at a later time.
I love that.
Yeah, so I want to conclude this show by letting everybody know and my extraordinary Americans know that there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. It's our duty to unleash it and awaken it. Until next time, bye for now. Hey there, everyone. Thank you for watching Extraordinary America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets you free. Also remember that your purchasing power is being diluted through inflation, and then the practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power by investing in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Also, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.